Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another Season 7 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today, I'm going to be covering top lane Malphite, the Shard of Monolith.
Caught between a rock and a hard place.
Alright, so let's hop right into this guide by looking at Malphite's pros and his cons. So first off the top, Malphite's obviously a very tanky champion that scales off of his armor. The more armor he has will make his W ability more effective, as well as his E ability. Malphite's even got a pretty damn strong passive for trading. As long as you can use your shielding passive effectively, you will be able to take a lot less damage in those trades. Finally, Malphite's also got a pretty good initiation, and he's very easy to pick up and learn. As long as you can land your ultimate on those squishy backline targets, you're setting up your team for success. Now, Malphite, however, does require some pretty solid decision making. You're a champion that's very reliant on follow-up, and you need to know when you can initiate into a team and when your team is nearby. If your team does happen to be pretty far behind, you may not always want to go for those initiations because your team may still lose them, so you kind of want to delay instead. Now, Malphite's also pretty weak against most AP lanes. Since he is a champion that likes to scale off of his armor, you don't really want to have to build a bunch of magic resist throughout the lane phase. Malphite's also a really mana-hungry champion early on, and he can be easily bullied by a lot of the champions out there. He's a really solid champion against most melee AD champions, but he does struggle against a lot of ranged champions and most AP ones. For your Masteries, you're going to go 18 Resolve and 12 Ferocity, grabbing Grasp of the Undying as your Keystone Mastery. This is going to give you a really nice extra chunk of sustain throughout that lane phase and make your trading a little bit easier. As for the rest of your Masteries, you pretty much just want to focus on increasing your tankiness as much as possible in the Resolve side, while increasing your damage a little bit more in the Ferocity side. If your team was really lacking in damage, you could always go 18 Cunning as well and take Thunderlord's Decree just for that extra burst damage. If, however, your team does have some pretty solid damage in it already, I would stick with Grasp of the Undying. Thunderlord's Decree is definitely not necessary. For your rune page, you want to go for attack damage reds, armor yellows, magic resist blues, and ability power quints. The ability power you pick up from your quints is going to make your abilities hit just a little bit easier, and the attack damage is going to make last hitting and trading a little bit more effective as well. You then of course want to pick up that armor because it does make you a tankier champion, and you do also scale off of it, and the magic resist is also fantastic against AP champions if you do run into any. If you were against a team that didn't really have any sources of magic damage, you could always go for glyphs of mana regeneration as well, just to help with your mana issues, but usually I'll just stick with the magic resist. For my summoner spells, I like to go for Flash and Teleport. Flash gives you a really solid and reliable escape and can be used offensively with your unstoppable force to engage from a fairly long distance. Teleport is then going to allow you to split push during the game and still make it to objectives and team fights. Malphite does also make a really great flanker, so teleport ganks are also going to be an option. If you're looking for added kill pressure, or if you're against champions that do abuse healing, you may want to consider taking Ignite instead of Teleport. Another option as well, if you were in a very hard matchup, would be Exhaust to shut down some damage. Usually, however, as a default, I will stick with Flash and Teleport. Your passive is Granite Shield, and this will give you a shield based on your maximum health, and it's great in trades and fights. Malphite shields himself for 10% maximum health, refreshing if he has not taken damage in the last between 10 and 6 seconds. So this is a fairly easy to understand passive, but you have to make sure you're using it to the fullest of its ability. To do this, you need to make sure you're moving out of fights and not taking damage to get this to refresh. As long as you're doing this, it will block an absolute ton of damage in the lane phase, and you're going to be rather healthy at most times. A really bad Malphite will take damage over and over again, and this won't refresh, and it's going to do very little for you, but if you use it effectively, it's going to be a very strong part of Malphite, especially in the lane phase. Since this also goes off your maximum health, it does scale well into the late game as well, and the shield can actually be pretty huge. Your Q ability is Seismic Shard, and this is a great poking tool that also gives you bonus movement speed and takes movement speed away from your enemy. When activated, Malphite sends a rock rolling to the target enemy, dealing magic damage to them upon impact, slowing them for 4 seconds and gaining bonus movement speed equal to the amount the target is slowed by. So usually as Malphite, although your W and your E are both really strong abilities, I will still max this ability first because it is a ranged ability and it's great for sticking onto targets with that bonus movement speed, and it does some pretty decent damage. I'll harass my lane opponent with this ability as much as I can through the lane phase and then focus on last hitting. It's also a really strong ability when your jungler's coming in for a gank because it steals a lot of movement speed, so of course they're able to stick onto the enemy as well as you. You don't want to necessarily always max this ability first, but it's a very viable option. Your W ability is Brutal Strikes, and this gives you a really nice chunk of bonus armor and also makes your auto attacks splash around your target. Passively, Malphite gains bonus armor, which is tripled while Granite Shield is active. When activated, for 6 seconds, Malphite's basic attacks deal bonus physical damage which splashes to enemies around his target. So this here is a pretty damn strong ability because you get a bunch of bonus armor, and of course you're going to take a lot less damage against those AD champions. When you activate it, you get a lot more armor than that, and your basic attacks also deal more damage and splash around your target. This of course is going to be great when you are trying to clear up minion waves or you're trying to trade damage onto the enemy. You want to activate it in both cases because that splash damage is actually pretty nice, and that bonus physical damage is going to make you hit pretty decent considering you are a tanky champion. Your E ability is Ground Slam, and this is an ability that scales off your AP and your armor and also cripples your enemies. When activated, Malphite slams the ground, dealing magic damage to all nearby enemies and crippling them for 3 seconds. So for anybody that doesn't know already, a cripple is when you reduce the attack speed of your enemies. That means against those champions that really rely on their attack speed, this is a very viable option to max first, and it's very strong against them. This is also an AoE ability that does have a 200 radius, so it's also fantastic for clearing up minion waves. To use this ability throughout the lane phase, if you are against a melee champion, this is great to use on them of course, and also hit the minion waves if you do need to try to push the lane. Malphite's definitely not the best champion at last hitting under turret, so this is a great way to keep them away from your turret and also harass the enemy at the same time. Since the enemy will also have reduced attack speed for 3 seconds, you can start autoing them and trading damage because they're not going to do very much back towards you. Your ultimate is Unstoppable Force, and this is your really solid engaging ability that does some pretty significant damage as well. When activated, Malphite dashes to the target location, becoming immune to crowd control effects for the duration and, upon impact, dealing magic damage to all nearby enemies as well as knocking them up for 1.5 seconds. Now this ability does also have a 1000 range and a 100% AP ratio, which makes it pretty damn solid. You can use it to easily jump onto the enemy team, and all the targets you hit are going to take a lot of damage. They will also be knocked up for 1.5 seconds, so this allows your team to engage, and it combos really effectively with things like Yasuo. Usually you'll want to use this ability really offensively and dive into the enemy backline, but it's also great for peeling for your allies or to just jump away yourself if you do get caught in a bad position. It's basically another long-range flash. For your skill order, you first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. Now the tricky thing about Malphite is maxing each ability is very viable, so your build is usually going to be different game to game. If I am against a somewhat easy lane, however, I will always max my Q ability first, followed by my E and then my W. This is because you'll be able to poke the enemy down with your Q ability and then get on top of them with that bonus movement speed to nuke them with your E as well. Against lanes that are really reliant on their attack speed, you could also max your E ability first instead. If they are an AD champion, you could then max your W ability second and leave your Q for last in this scenario. This is going to make them do pretty much no damage to you at all, and winning the lane phase is going to be rather easy. You'll need to identify what type of lane you're in, and then max the skill that's going to help you the most. In the lane phase, you want to start poking the enemy as soon as you have 2 points in your Seismic Shard. It's not worth using too much at level 1 because the damage isn't that high and the mana cost is really high. If you need help last hitting, then activate your Brutal Strikes for extra damage. Try not to let the minion wave near your tower though, last hitting under it can really suck for Malphite early on in the game. You'll then want to try and get your passive shield up as much as possible. It has the potential to win you trades over and over again, but it does have a long cooldown early on, so try to be careful not to get poked when you're waiting for it to refresh. In most cases, you want to try to rush a Sunfire Cape to help with last hitting, but you may want to rush Magic Resist first against some AP champions. In teamfights, you'll find yourself either being the initiator or a peeler. Most often, your job's going to be to dive onto the enemy team's backline with your Unstoppable Force and pop up their carries for your team to follow up and delete. If the enemy gets the initiation on you, however, then you may want to use your Unstoppable Force to peel for your carries if the enemy team does get on top of them quickly. This ability can easily save their lives and they're going to have more than enough time to start kiting away. If possible, try and steal movement speed from an enemy carry that relies on their mobility by using your Seismic Shard. This can make it a lot harder for them to escape and of course to get onto your teammates. So now let's look at some of your hard matchups, and let's start off with Kayle. Now Kayle's going to be a really hard matchup because not only does she have mixed damage, but she also shreds your armor and magic resist. That means that even if you build some armor or magic resist against her, a bunch of damage is still going to get through. Of course, she's also a ranged champion that will harass the shit out of you, and you're not really going to get on top of her because of her movement speed and her slow. Finally, she can also save her allies with her ultimate if you do try to all-in them, so there's a lot going against you in this matchup. Next up here, we have Maokai. Maokai's a champion you really can't out-trade because he's going to do a lot of damage to you, and the sustain from his passive is actually pretty crazy. Since he is an AP-based champion, he's going to do a lot of magic damage, and therefore you're going to have to build some sort of magic resist, and you can't just stack armor, which is what you scale off of. In this matchup, try to make great use of your passive shield to block a lot of his damage, and only poke him with your Q. Next up, we have another tanky AP champion in Singed. Now, although you have your Q ability to try and stick on top of people, Singed is not somebody you can usually stick on top of, and he's just going to run around and be annoying. This of course means you will be in his poison trail, and you're going to probably take a lot of damage if you do try to actually kill a Singed. Therefore, you're going to have to build some magic resist early on, although Malphite usually doesn't want to, and try not to get in long trades because he will win those with his poison trail. And for the last hard matchup here, we've got Swain. Swain is a champion that you're pretty much not going to be able to all-in because he is rather tanky and he has a ton of sustain from his ultimate. Against this Swain, you're going to have no choice but to build a bunch of magic resist early on, and of course you're not going to be that strong since you won't have the armor for your W and your E ability. Against him, you're going to want to try to play pretty passively, avoid long trades because he will keep sustained and destroy you. Alright, now let's finish this off with the item build, which starts with either a Doran Shield health potion and a warding totem, or a corrupting potion and a warding totem. I usually like to go for the Doran Shield myself, but the corrupting potion is still a really solid option, especially if you like to spam your abilities as much as possible. For your core build, we then have the Sunfire Cape and Iceborne Gauntlet. Of course, if you are against an AP champion, you would want to get one of the AP items before these two items, but these ones will always be in your core build. The Sunfire Cape will keep the minion wave away from your tower and of course make you a great split pusher, and the Iceborne Gauntlet will give you some nice added damage and make you a tankier champion at the same time. Of course, you'll also get that 20% CDR, which is going to be a fantastic thing on Malphite because your ultimate's cooldown is rather long. So for your boot options, you first have the Ninja Tabbies against high AD teams, or the Merc Treads against high AP and CC heavy teams. Usually you want to go for the Ninja Tabbies, but the Merc Treads are great against those AP heavy teams. For your item pool, we first have the Thornmail. This is a really strong armor item that also reflects damage and gives grievous wounds, so of course it works great on Malphite since you want a lot of armor. If you then needed some magic resist, you could get either the Abyssal Mask, Adaptive Helm, or the Spirit Visage. I really like the Abyssal Mask because it does give you 10% more damage, but the Adaptive Helm is really solid against champions that spam the same ability over and over again, like a Rise, Cassiopeia, or a Rumble. Spirit Visage is then of course just a fantastic item as well. It does give you 10% at the same time, so it is a very viable pickup. If you then want some of both with a really solid defensive option, you could go for the Stoneplate. This will make you pretty much unkillable for 4 seconds, so as long as you pull off your all-in combo, you can activate this ability afterwards and take no damage from the enemy team. If you're then looking for some armor, health, and a little bit of added mobility, you could always get the Dead Man's Plate. I don't pick it up too much myself because I prefer getting something like a Thornmail, but it is still a viable option. Then finally, if you want some regeneration and a really high health pool, you could always go for the Warmogs. For my example full build, however, I take that core build, then add an Abyssal Mask, Thornmail, and a Gargoyle Stoneplate. You're going to be an extremely tanky champion, but you will still do a lot of damage because of the Iceborne Gauntlet, the Abyssal Mask, and of course just your kit in general. And that's all I've got for top lane Malphite. If you guys did enjoy the video, please make sure you like and subscribe, and also check out the video description below. I have a link to all my social medias, and I also have things like a Discord server, so there's some you should definitely check out. But other than that, thank you guys so much for checking out the video. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy, have a good day, and peace.